Hello everyone. We are going to start our next unit, which is quadratics. So today is just going to be graphing them using a table of values. So this word quadratics refers to equations that have x squareds in them. And there might be more to it, like a 2x squared or a 2x squared minus 5, like you see on the bottom right-hand screen, something like that. When you graph a quadratic, it looks like a U. And either your U is going to be facing up or your U is going to be facing down. But where it's located on the graph and how it opens depends on the equation. So we're going to start with quadratics today. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to complete the table of values, remembering to follow order of operations. Remember parentheses, exponents, multiply, divide, and last add and subtract. The main one is that exponents happen before you multiply or divide, and I'll show you why that's going to be important in a minute. Once you have your table of values, you're going to graph the points x comma y. Now, while your worksheet has the tables and a graph, if you can't print it, that's completely fine. You are going to write your table of values on your piece of binder paper, and then you're just going to sketch your graph. Sketching it is absolutely acceptable. If you want to print some graph paper, there's always free graph paper you can find online, but sketching it will be just fine. So for problem number 1, our equation is y equals x squared. So there's that exponent of a 2 that I mentioned. So on this equation, all it's telling us to do is take the x value and square it. Remembering that squaring means multiplying it by itself. So if we first started off with -2, what we're going to do is -2 squared, which is the same as -2 times -2. And -2 times -2 is positive 4. For our next number, -1 squared means -1 times -1, which is 1. For 0 squared is 0. 1 squared is 1. And 2 squared is 4. Now, as you go, you will start seeing a pattern. There is a pattern to quadratics. Now, if I were to graph these, the first point says -2, -4. That means I'm going to go left 2 and up 4. So if I go left 2 and up 4, that's that dot right there. For -1, -1, I'm going to go left 1, up 1. 0, 0 is the origin. 1, 1 is right 1, up 1. And 2, 4 is right 2, up 4. Now you'll notice that my graph looks like this. What you're going to do is you're not going to use a ruler. You're going to kind of sketch a little bit taller than your highest dots there, a U, and then you're going to put arrows on the ends because that means that graph keeps going up. We just don't feel like graphing it very much further than that. Okay, let's try another one. This problem is why we do order of operations. So remember that order of operations says we do exponents before we multiply, divide, or add or subtract. So the first thing we have to do is actually figure out what x squared is. That's our first step. Then our second step is going to be multiply by 2 because in parentheses exponents, multiply divides next. And then the third step is to subtract 5 because that's the add or subtract. So what I'm going to do with -2 is first I'm going to say, okay, what is -2 squared? That is 4. So -2 squared is 4. Now I'm going to multiply that by 2 because that's my next step. 4 times 2 is 8. And my last step is to subtract 5, and 8 minus 5 is 3. So let's try this again. -1 squared means -1 times -1. Means -1 times -1, which is 1. Times 2, because that's my second step, is 2. And our last step, minus 5, gets us a -3. If I plug in 0, 0 squared is 0. Times 2 is 0. Minus 5 is -5. Plugging in 1, 1 squared is 1. Times 2 is 2. Minus 5 is -3. And lastly, 2 squared is 4. Times 2 is 8, minus 5 is 3. So if I now graph that, I'm going to go -2, comma 3, which means left 2, up 3. -1, -3, which means left 1, down 3. And 0, -5, which means left or right 0, down 5. And the other half, 1, -3, and 2, 3. So if I zoom in, this is a very skinny U. Kind of goes like this. Looks almost more like a V, but it actually is a U. So there's the graph of that quadratic there. Okay, last one I want to show you has a negative because you are going to come across negatives. Now again, order of operations says that exponents happened first. So that negative is actually like you're multiplying by a -1. So the first thing you're going to do is square. The second thing you're going to do is multiply it by -1. And the third thing is add 3, order of operations. So our first is the exponents. Our second is the multiply by -1. And the third is adding a 3. So if I plugged in -2, -2 squared is 4, times -1 is -4, plus 3 is a -1. -1 squared is 1, times a -1 is -1, plus 3 is 2. 0 squared is 0, times -1 is 0, plus 3 is 3. And 1 squared is 1, times -1 is -1, plus 3 is 2. Have you seen the pattern? And 2 squared is 4, times -1 is -4, plus 3 is -1. So if I graphed these, I have -2, -1, -1, 2, 0, 3, 1, 2, and 2, -1. And what you'll notice is this one actually is upside down. So if you end up having that negative in front of your x squared, it ends up being upside down. And we'll talk more about that later. So today's assignment is just filling in your table, and I want to see this work. So this work over here, I want to see. This is your work. Just writing down the answers is not going to be enough because that's on the answer key. I want to see the work. So showing me the work, the table, and your graph. Your word of the day is quadratic because this is the beginning of our quadratic unit. And today's assignment is Graphing Quadratics Part 1, and it is due on Tuesday, April 7th. Have a great day.